Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Career Choice Series webinar on lawyer professional responsibility and loss prevention. The Career Choice Series is designed to help you choose your career path. Whether you're a law student, young lawyer, or transitioning attorney, find out what it's like to work in various practice areas and the best way to position yourself to get there. The Career Choice Series is brought to you today by ABA Legal Career Central, Law Student Division, Young Lawyers Division, and the Center for Professional Responsibility. Since 1978, the ABA Center for Professional Responsibility has provided national leadership in developing and promoting policies and standards that govern the conduct and regulation of lawyers and judges. The 5 ABA standing committees under the center's umbrella focus on issues related to lawyer and judicial ethics, professional regulation, professionalism, client protection, and lawyer specialty certification. The Young Lawyers Division is here to help new lawyers navigate the early years of their career and law students prepare for life after law school. The Law Student Division offers premium benefits, which includes a savings of $250 on Barbary Bar Review, $25 off West academic casebooks, and a legal ethics bundle that includes a free Model Rules of Professional Conduct ebook. Upgrade to premium for $25. Sign up today at abaforlawstudents.com/go premium. ABA Legal Career Central is a career center that offers both career development resources and a job board for law students, lawyers, and other legal professionals across all disciplines and career stages. Today's moderator is Kathy Morris, a former criminal defense attorney and longtime legal ethics adjunct professor at Northwestern Law. She was the founding board chair of ABA Legal Career Central and has been an advisor to LCC as well as a regular contributor to the ABA Voice of Experience magazine. Kathy is a veteran career counselor for lawyers and law students through Under Advisement Limited and tweets each workday at Lawyer Counselor. Thank you so much for being here, Kathy. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome all. We especially want to welcome our faculty today. Theresa goes by Terri, Gronkiewicz, and Lucian Pera. Let me tell you quickly about the confluence of their careers in ethics and professional responsibility. Terri's Senior Counsel at the ABA Center for Professional Responsibility, where she works in Chicago. And Lucian is a partner in a 300-lawyer firm, Adams and Reese, and he's coming to us today out of Memphis. I'm in New York today and wanted to let you know that Terri, prior to joining the ABA Center, prosecuted and defended lawyers for ethics matters. And Lucian is a commercial litigator who, among other things, represents lawyers, law firms, others on issues of legal ethics and lawyer professional responsibility. And very interestingly, they both have a significant impact on ethics and the model rules. Lucian was a member of the ABA committee that rewrote the model rules of professional conduct, and he did the same for the Tennessee rules. And Terri spends her whole career now advising on ABA policy and developing programs, speaking on issues of ethics, professionalism, lawyer, and even judicial regulation and professional responsibility. So with that, welcome both of you. I think I'd like to start quickly with Terri. The ethics field is, so to speak, a relatively new field, but always a growing one. Can you give us a quick overview of the practice area as you know it?
Yes, Kathy, I can. And first I'd like to say thank you for inviting me to speak on this panel and to share my experience. So ethics and professional responsibility, I just want to say it's more than just knowing the rules of professional conduct. Although a good grasp of the rules is essential, it requires you to evaluate various situations and advise lawyers on professional and ethical conduct beyond the rules. You'll find lawyers working in this area in various settings. Here as staff counsel, of course, at the center, but for many years I was in private practice defending lawyers, representing judges and law students in ethics and disciplinary matters. That required me to evaluate and analyze ethical situations involving client trust accounts, partnership disputes, the business of running a law office, marketing, lawyer marketing, technology, with respect to ethical issues and obligations and how the rules impact the use of the internet, social media, and things like that. So it's a very varied practice with respect to how the model rules of professional conduct impact a lawyer's day-to-day activities and professional judgment.
Oh, thanks. Lucian, as you talk about the practice area, I know that your work also encompasses, I guess, what we'll broadly call loss prevention, risk management, conflicts, et cetera. Can you give us a quick overview?
Sure, and it's good to be with you and Terry. It's good to be talking. Yeah, the loss prevention you mentioned is a word that insurers and others have come up with to describe a lot of the functions of lawyers with respect to a law firm or a law office's work to try to keep claims down or keep bar complaints down. You know, it's a forward-looking, preventive kind of measure. So that's one element of what lawyers do. An increasing sort of sub-specialty in this area is lawyers within law firms, both general counsel, who often come up through the ranks of the law firm, and staff counsel, who may spend their whole day clearing conflicts of interest, which to some people that's very interesting. Others might find it a bit boring, but so it's, you know, the ethics field is just really a very varied place these days. Let's put it that way.
Okay, and so for each of you, sort of what was your career path into this field? Lucian, why don't you hop in again?
Well, really, it started in two ways. One, my firm, which was, I've only practiced with two, but my earlier firm, Armstrong Allen, which went out of business in 2006, in the late 80s and early 90s, I joined in 86. We were members of a big lawyer mutual malpractice firm called ALAS, A-L-A-S, which pretty much invented loss prevention for law firms, as far as I'm concerned. They insisted that law firms have somebody who is an ethics person in the firm, their main interface, but also a person charged with overseeing all of those loss prevention activities, being the ethics lawyer for the firm. I got that role as about a third-year associate, probably because nobody else wanted it. And then at the same time, roughly, I put together, back in the days before the internet, many of our listeners will not know there was a time before the internet, but there was. We used paper and all that stuff, and the only way you could get ethics opinions from our authority in Tennessee was to go to one of three places where those three copies, they had black three-ring binders with copies of these, and that was it. So we published them in a book, and that was a notable improvement for Tennessee lawyers, and I was in charge of that project. And over the ensuing years, lawyers and bars would call me to do CLEs, then they would call me to help them out with a discipline complaint or a disqualification motion or something like that, and gradually it just grew and grew. Over that same period of time, the profession or the field really grew as well. You know, in 1990, the Association of Professional Responsibility Lawyers was formed. It's really mostly respondents counsel, folks who did discipline work. We had 100 members, maybe 2 per state, and not really 2 per state. You know, now we've got about 600.
All right, well, that's growing. You know, and I want to mention, based on your mention of ALAS, and there are other insurers, of course, for lawyers and law firms, but ALAS, for example, does have a host of in-house counsel who practice and write about ethics rules, who go around the country and speak. You can bring them to your workplace if you're an ALAS member, etc. And, you know, there are consultants now who've gone out into the practice. There are, obviously, as I was, teachers for professional responsibility and ethics. So it's got some varied possibilities. Terri, sort of, you, I know, prosecuted the lawyers in Illinois through the Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission, and you also worked with a guru of ethics in Illinois for quite a long time, George Collins. So how did you make it into sort of that field? What was your path?
Well, Kathy, pretty much by happenstance. I graduated from law school with a pretty tight job market, and a challenge to find employment, and I applied for a position at the Illinois Attorney Registration Disciplinary Commission, and I was hired as an entry-level attorney there, and then kind of went up a little bit. And that gave me an opportunity to interact not only with the volunteer lawyers who sit on the various panels, inquiry committees, and disciplinary boards, but also with opposing counsel, and that's how I met George Collins, who was a frequent opponent of mine And when I was contemplating leaving the ARDC, he contacted me and suggested that I leave the dark side, so to speak, as he referred to it, and join his side, the side of enlightenment. And I did.
Doesn't everybody refer to it that way?
I did that, and I did that for 23 years, a very rewarding experience, and then decided to broaden my expertise on a more national level and joined the staff here at the ABA.
Well, that's interesting. You know, it's a very competitive field now. A lot of lawyers want to get jobs, as you did at first at the ARDC. It's very hard to do that, so that's very impressive. I also have a question, and it kind of goes into the day in the life. It's a varied practice. You've mentioned that. Terri, you spend all your time on this arena. Let's start with Lucian first, because Lucian, I'm curious, sort of what would you say, what percentage of your work, you're a commercial litigator, you work in media law, what percentage of your work would you say is on ethics, professional responsibility, loss prevention, etc., and is there such a thing with this varied practice as a day in the life?
I get to ask that question in depositions quite frequently, and it's very hard for me to give an answer. I'm an expert from time to time, and but it in some years is more than half of my time to do all the I mean, and I throw into that bucket, by the way, a lot of stuff, everything from, you know, forward-looking advice to law firms, or cleaning up after messes, or disciplinary defense, or expert work, and frankly, I advise businesses that deal with lawyers that have to deal with ethics rules. I mean, like litigation funders and marketing companies. So I throw all that in there, and all of that some years will be more than half of my practice. Yeah. And yeah, day in the life is a little strange sometimes. You know, I have internal things I field for my firm, because I'm one of the people in my firm who field ethics and claims issues. So I may be clearing a conflict or working on something that we want to not turn into a claim. I have enough expert work, so that's not daily, but it is, you know, more than monthly. So I may be working on an expert report. I've got a couple of projects right now for it that are sort of, one that's literally right in front of me right now is a law firm that wants to do a new advertising marketing program with what looks like a new entrant into that market, and so we're working through the kinks on that. And I've also got well, it's sort of a law firm and sort of not a law firm that wants to start getting into the delivery of legal services with a law firm. So there's just, and then I got discipline stuff. I got a call in about an hour with some lawyers from out of state who got a disciplinary complaint filed against them, and to figure out, you know, how we defend them and all that sort of thing. So it's a mixed bag, not just, I mean, even within the ethics arena, it's lots of different directions.
Well, that's fascinating. Terri, I don't think currently, you know, you practice as Lucian does in court, etc. But what is it? What is a day in the life of your work like now?
So here at the ABA, I support 3 center committees. I staff the Standing Committee on Professionalism, the Center's CLE Committee, and the Center's Diversity Committee. And in that role, I provide counsel and guidance in developing policy that the committee may be involved in, legal research for them, providing them information regarding various ethics, professional responsibility issues. I assist in developing CLE programs regarding ethics and professional responsibility. I work with other ABA entities in that regard on those issues, or outside entities. Lucian mentioned April, which is the Association of Professional Responsibility Lawyers, as well as the NOBC, which is the National Organization of Bar Counsel, and that's the Regulatory Lawyers Association. And I may be doing some programming with them. So different roles, depending on which committee I'm working on, they all pretty much have the same mission, and that's to promote ethics and professional responsibility in terms of education, outreach, and programming to lawyers and law students. And in private practice, it was 100% devoted to ethics and professional responsibility in terms of drafting responses to grievances, writing appellate briefs for matters on appeal and disciplinary recommendations, preparing for hearing, doing any kind of litigation work regarding the disciplinary hearing matters. as well as being interrupted daily with the got-it-minute calls from lawyers who were either on their way to court, going to be sanctioned by a judge, or how to get out of a ethical dilemma. Those took a greater portion of my day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fascinating, both of you. But let me ask you this, if it's something you can answer. Terri, let's keep on with you. We have sort of this love-hate. I think hate's a little strong, perhaps, but what do you really love about working in your field? And then I'm going to ask the same to Lucian, and then I'm going to come back to you about some of the challenges. So kick us off on what you especially like about working as you do.
Yeah. So what I find working in this particular field is especially fulfilling and rewarding, because you're helping your colleagues. I mean, these are fellow lawyers who are seeking a better understanding of the professional obligations and how to serve their clients, or to resolve ethical dilemmas, or how to minimize disciplinary exposure, and achieving a successful result for them. Oftentimes, lawyers, and most often, are representing non-lawyers from various backgrounds. In this field, your client is a lawyer, so you're already starting out ahead. You don't have to explain the judicial process or the process and procedures, although many of them aren't aware of the particular disciplinary procedures that they may face. But be it as they may, they have a better understanding, and they can help you and assist you in the representation. So I find that I am able to make a difference in this profession with my colleagues as particularly rewarding.
Lucian?
Yeah, I mean, I share a lot of that. I mean, having lawyers as clients, I guess I'd say two things in the love category. Lawyers are actually really good clients, although I don't like to tell my clients that, because they just, it's just not psychologically a good thing. But lawyers have this notion that lawyers are terrible clients, and there are a few that are, and I just try to avoid them, frankly. I mean, to be honest, there's some lawyers I'm not going to represent. And anyway, but lawyers generally being very informed are good. The other thing's nice about lawyers is most have no clue of what lawyers do for others. That is to say, I mean, it's almost a constant in my life. Some lawyer comes up for help on something, calls up for help on something, and about, after the second call and second meeting, they will say, gosh, that was really useful. That was really helpful. I feel so much better. And I go, this is what you do for clients. And they go, oh. So it's enlightening in that sense. I mean, the other thing is there is a sliver of my practice that's about building stuff these days, new businesses that are trying to spring up in the delivery of legal services, and there are several of those I've helped over the years, and that's actually fascinating. It's a little nerve-wracking because there's no law or no rules in some sense, but if you've got a client like that who's really trying to build something and is trying to comply, that can be really interesting work.
Well, let's continue that conversation and talk first with you about some of the challenges or things you like a little bit less about the arena. You talked about in some parts of the work, there are no laws or rules, and so tell us what else. What are some other of the challenges that you face?
Well, lawyers, notwithstanding my glowing comments about lawyers as clients, there are some times when they aren't rational, when they really are not, occasionally not willing to listen to a lawyer. But that's true for every lawyer's practice. I mean, I don't know a lawyer who doesn't have that issue, and I just think that's as far as things to hate go, I'm very lucky, because the few clients I've had like that, I've mostly been able to get rid of, and my clients often are easier to get rid of than some other people's clients for a whole number of reasons. But I do think the challenges, I suppose it depends what your practice is like, but when I say no law, what I mean is that you can go research it all day long, and there's no answer to the question. You have the rules, you have case law that sits next to that question in the books, but there's no answer to the question. And all lawyers who are have nice practices do that. I mean, everybody does that. But the profession is changing so much and so fast today that we got a lot of those questions in this field, just like in a number of other fields. Social media, for example, there's been an explosion of opinions, ethics opinions, cases in the last 4 or 5 years. And so there is more guidance, but it's awfully thin, and it's sometimes contradictory, and some of it is just awful bad law that we know no other court is ever going to follow. So that's an area where it's very difficult. You're on the frontier, frankly, and that's challenging. And you know, that's fun. I mean, anybody who wants to be a lawyer who doesn't find that challenging really doesn't want to be a lawyer.
Terri, what about some of your challenges?
Okay, so I agree with what Lucian said. Certainly keeping up with the ever-changing legal marketplace and then being able to address those issues when lawyers come to seek advice from you. But I found most challenging was the ability to get the message out to lawyers that there are tools and resources out there to help them either to avoid ethical problems or to address the ethical dilemmas they face. Often at times I found that lawyers could have avoided a disciplinary case if they took the time to seek advice to help them make the professional judgment calls or to take a moment even to reflect on the impact of their conduct or decision on their law license, which would have prevented them from facing disciplinary charges or even prevented them from facing serious, where you take a mistake that maybe might have resulted in a minor sanction and made it much worse by not reacting appropriately. And those were the challenges I found most significant when I represented lawyers.
You know, I also think one of the issues in this area is that some of the decisions are pretty subtle, and a certain number of them, especially sort of for the lawyer in the firm or organization, has to deal not only with legal issues, say in conflicts, but with business and industry issues. And I think there's I don't know if it's fair to go so far to say there's a real tension there, but I think that makes it much more complex. And that's why a lot of organizations will have these ethics committees and trainings around ethics and whatnot. There's a lot of CLE, as Terri mentioned. But Terri, is there still an ABA hotline that people can call? They used to be able to do that confidentially if they had questions.
Actually, there is. The center has an ethics search counsel that is available to answer. Peter Garrity, he's fantastic, able to answer ethics questions. You pose them more in a hypothetical situation, but he can provide the ethics opinions that are out there that would help address it, direct you to the rules, the model rules, and provide any other resources to help the attorney address the particular issue that they're facing.
And I hope some of the states have that, because obviously we know you got to read the model rules and then your state's rules. So let me ask you this question as we kind of move along. Lucian, let me start with you. What would you say are the top 3 skills that someone needs to work as we'll just call it professional responsibility lawyer?
You know, 2 things come to mind. One, and this is probably the less important, is in my view, it is a pretty dynamic field in terms of the law and how the rules get applied. And there's a lot of law that is not law, in the sense that whenever I'm called on to answer some questions in other jurisdictions, you know, I can get the law, I've got the books, I've got the, you know, the everything. But often there's a lot sort of below the law. There's lore, there's custom, there's how a rule is interpreted by the disciplinary authority, there's the priorities they assign. And you really need to both be willing to stay current with the ethics opinions and things like that, and be flexible enough, much like business lawyers, frankly, are, but also litigators, about you know, local or more than local custom and practice. And that not every lawyer is interested in that. The other thing, though, that's probably more important in my view, if what you're doing is advising lawyers on these issues, I see it every day in the difference between people in this field who do well and who don't do well. The people who do well have a certain cast of mind, certainly those within organizations, but I don't think it's limited to those. A certain cast of mind in this sense, there's a certain humility required and a certain orientation toward a positive outcome. The shorthand I use is, you don't want to be Dr. No. If you are in a 5-person law firm or representing from outside a 5-person law firm on these issues, and every time you get a question about something, your orientation and attitude is, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. They're never going to call you again, either to pay you or to get an answer for free if they're your partner. It's not going to happen. So your answer to when someone calls you and they want to do something that you immediately know is wrong, and they probably know is wrong, but they're calling you saying, well, can I do this? You know, the answer often has to be, well, of course, yeah, I think we can find a way to do that, or maybe not. Maybe we might be able to find a way to do it. Let's talk to this. Let's pull out the rule. Let's look at the rule. Well, what about this section? I don't know if that's going to work here. And what about this? Maybe we could try this. And if you show a willingness to be proactive, you see this in business lawyers all the time. There are some business lawyers that are death to deals. That if one of my corporate partners sees them show up on the other side of the deal, it's going to be way more expensive and take twice as long. So without surrendering, the need to comply in good faith and provide a safety zone too, often as an ethics lawyer, if you're willing to make something work, to get to the business goal of the lawyer in interviewing a witness in a piece of litigation, if you're useful, if you're productive to them, then you'll get more calls and you'll have a better impact on their lives because they'll listen to you. I know that's a subtle thing, but I think that's really probably the most important thing.
Terri, from your perspective, is that any other top skill?
I agree wholeheartedly with that, because basically, you're there to solve their problem, and saying no, you can't do this. You've got to figure out a way. So it requires an ability to evaluate matters really from both sides, and being able to evaluate, how the rules will work in that situation that the client is seeking your advice on. And importantly, too, you're there to provide a perspective to your clients that they're lacking, whether it's objectivity. Sometimes it's necessary to tell the lawyer, hey, just walk away from this. It's not good to fight with your client and file a fee petition because all these other things can now be raised against you, and the cost of defending then a counterclaim will be well beyond the amount that the client owes. Or you know what, it's time for you to eat humble pie. You need to accept responsibility and show remorse. And being able to guide your clients with that orientation is very important. And then the obvious, litigation and appellate skills, good oral advocacy and writing skills, and to be able to provide cohesive written responses on your client's behalf to complaint letters that might be where you're required to decipher a 15-page single-space diatribe from a client outlining every wrong suffered by the client, and then you've got to spot the relevant issues that the disciplinary counsel will be looking at, and then being able to respond. And then lastly, I would say you definitely have to have a capacity for compassion and empathy. Oftentimes you're working with lawyers who are suffering from alcohol or substance abuse or mental illness that impact their professional conduct, and you've got to find a way to help them out of that situation. And it's a unique skill, and it's very important in this field of work.
Yeah, that's all very interesting. We had a question from one of our listeners. In addition to those skills that you're all mentioning, they wanted to know what are employers looking for when seeking young lawyers in this field. If they don't have the exact experience, what would maybe draw an employer to someone's application? And I want to say, I think one of the things that young lawyers can always show, even without experience, is maturity. And part of being mature for this field is being discreet. These are very sensitive issues. Sometimes, as these people have both told you, they're within your own organization. And so the capacity to not only empathize and analyze, but also to be extremely discreet, I think is a key point. Do either of you have anything quickly to add for the young lawyers who are listening?
I think, frankly, experience might be the best. In other words, I think going to work for a lawyer disciplinary authority, for example, or in the few firms, and they're only the big firms, a couple hundred firms in the country who have multiple positions and some lower level positions in a sort of GC office, that would be, if you really want to get in this field, that's probably the way to do it. Because otherwise, I know a guy that was hired to a big firm as their GC who had no background. They hired him from one of their other offices because they trusted him. Because he had those sort of human qualities, lawyerly qualities, but he knew nothing about this. And, it's hard to find a gig that way. It's hard to, prove that you're an honest and trustworthy person to your partners at the right time when the GC is leaving or something. I mean, that's karma. That's not training.
I agree. And really, you have to have a reputation, even as a young lawyer or a law student. Your reputation must be stellar, because they're not going to accept your advice or really rely on what you have to say in defending another lawyer if there's a question about your reputation.
All right, so let me ask you this. We got two more quick questions that we plan to ask you. And one, always interesting, what would people be surprised to know about working in ethics and professional responsibility? Terri?
I would say that your skill sets that you require go beyond being a lawyer. I found that I was called upon not only to be a lawyer in advising other lawyers, but I was a counselor, advisor, therapist, social worker, mentor, psychologist. Sometimes even I felt I was their mother in offering the advice that was necessary to get them through the process. And the fact that you actually need a understanding, and not necessarily expertise, but to develop some understanding in all areas of law, whether it's transactional work, probate, guardianship, family law, criminal law, because you're called upon to represent lawyers in these fields, and you have to have some understanding on how their conduct and what they did with respect to that particular case impacted the rules of conduct or didn't impact.
Interesting. Lucian?
I agree with Terri. Those are exactly the two things that came to my mind, is how much subject matter expertise you need, and the fact that, whether you admit it or the client admits it, you're going to wind up being their counselor sometimes.
What about when, here's the question we have from a listener, what about when you're kind of challenged by the ethics rules yourself in this arena? This person asked, and we can give a short answer to this if you don't mind. Has either of you ever had a client you clearly knew it acted unethically, and how did you defend them? That could be a long story, but short story?
Well, there are two, let me jump in. There are two answers to that. I mean, one is, it's the criminal defense answer, okay? I've defended a bunch of lawyer scumbags. There are certain things criteria they have to meet before I'm going to represent them, but I've represented guilty lawyers. I've represented lawyers who've stolen money, been convicted of crimes. I mean, it's the criminal defense. They deserve a lawyer, period. And if they're willing to be a good client, if you can do something for them, God bless. But I mean, I will say this other thing, which is about my own issues. It's the number one truth of this part that I've learned over, working in this area. It's lawyers are human beings. They cannot, most of them, be rational about their own matters. If I have a serious conflict issue, I do not handle it by myself. Never. I go down the hall, even to somebody who's not an ethics guru, and I walk through it with them. Because lawyers, number one, they're not rational in the sense that they use all their faculties to address the problem. Number two, they're emotionally involved, and they cannot, more often than not, they cannot be objective.
Okay.
I would say the same. I mean, you're not there to judge your client. You're there to provide advice and guidance through the process. So it doesn't matter whether they did or didn't do or violate the rule. You're there to protect their due process rights, which is important. Make sure that disciplinary counsel meets their burden in proving the charges if you're contesting them, and also that they do whatever they need to do to minimize the sanction that potentially could be imposed in the case. I mean, your role is varied and depending on the case and the situation.
That's all great advice. I'm sure that there's a lot more our listeners can do to read up on issues and controversies in the field. But for now, to close, let me switch gears 1 second and ask you each, because I think it's an important question, how has the ABA involvement that you've had boosted your own career? Terri.
Well, I became an ABA member early in my career, so I found that at that point, just having the resources available that the ABA has, especially the Center for Professional Responsibility, I found in private practice extremely invaluable was the publication by the Center, the ABA BNA Lawyer's Manual on Professional Conduct. And that is a library of compilation of various articles, ethics opinions, decisions, regarding professional responsibility in every respect. So that is a huge go-to resource. And also, ABA membership provided me access to lawyers on a national level with expertise in these areas. I interacted with lawyers associated with the other entities that I mentioned, NOBC and April, and lawyers who share the same level of interest on professional responsibility issues and ethics.
And Lucian, I remember you were the treasurer of the ABA at one point, so you've held really significant leadership roles as well. But I think you joined the ABA in the first year of your practice. So give us a little sense of what it's meant for you.
Yeah, and I mean, let's start with the TBA though. I mean, I began my ethics work with the Tennessee Bar Association, a voluntary bar, but really one that became, frankly, during the course of my time with it, the guardian of the rules in Tennessee. We are a voluntary bar, but we're the ones who initiated and shaped every change to our ethics rules in Tennessee. I was chair of that committee for about 10 years, and so that was my entree. And then and I sort of had sort of two paths in the ABA. I've been active as a young lawyer and then as an older lawyer, let's just say, in general parts of the ABA, so to speak, and then in the ethics world, the Center for Professional Responsibility. And those kind of fed into each other because, I was on the Board of Governors in the 90s as a young lawyer, the ABA Board of Governors. And everybody who's on the board, if they don't act really badly, winds up with some kind of assignment afterwards of some consequence. And I wound up on Ethics 2000, as you mentioned, the group that rewrote the model rules, and which was an amazing thing. I was younger than the other members of that group by probably 20 years. And it was amazing people. It was Jeff Hazard and Larry Fox, people, Nancy Moore, who were just at the absolute top of the field. So that exposed me to a whole different kind of realm and level of ethics, the ethics practice, and it was just invaluable. And I've been active in the center ever since. So the ABA has been an integral part. And, again, two tracks there in the ABA. Being treasurer didn't have much to do with ethics, legal ethics, but still, it was just a part of the whole package of being active in the ABA.
Yeah, and good business skills, I'm sure arose out of that. You brought them to it, and they built there. So that's all great. I want to thank you both. This is a fascinating field. We encourage lawyers to look into it further. And speaking of the resources of the ABA, let me turn this back to Emily because I think you want to say a few words before we close.
Yes, thank you so much, Kathy, for moderating. And Terri and Lucian, thanks for giving us a flavor of what it's like to be an ethics and professional responsibility lawyer. And thank you all for attending today's webinar. You can check out upcoming programs on our website at ambar.org/careers. On your screen right now is our next Career Choice Series webinar. And this is our upcoming Career Advice Series webinar. You can also connect with us on social media. And you can go to our About page to learn more about our board. Please complete our short survey before you leave, and thank you again for joining us today. Have a great day.